Hi everybody. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to plan your lesson plan. For many of you, this will be your first lesson plan for your lab work here in the early childhood program. So not to worry, I'm going to help you. The first thing you're going to need is your Art as a Way of Learning manual, and it's a curriculum framework, and that means the different languages of art, such as language, math, science, music, movement, visual arts, will be included in this manual. In the classroom, you have one that is a hard copy, and that's green. But I'm showing you one here online, and you'll see here that each language of literacy, which we'll plan for in our curriculum, is clearly laid out. I'm going to scroll down to math because for your purposes for this semester, you're going to plan for math only. Many of your experiences might include singing a song about math, reading a book about math, and having conversations with children. But for your focus, and because you're learning about math concepts and elements, as you see here, the processes and the elements of math, you're going to use this page, so page 12, and page 13 as the pages that you sit down with each time you plan a lesson. In class, you should be discussing with your instructor ideas and experiences that you could plan for different age groups. You should also be using your book. Your book is an excellent reference. At the end of each chapter, it gives ideas, and some of those ideas you can change to be either easier or more challenging depending on the age group you work with. So, when you're ready to plan, you'll always plan a week ahead. So when you go to Lab 4, before you leave Lab 4, you're going to show your cooperating teacher your lesson plan, and it looks like this. So here's a blank one. And so you're to show your cooperating teacher this section right here. Okay? You're going to show them the anticipatory set. How do you plan to engage or interest the children? If you are going to do painting and you're going to be counting with sponges and different objects, then you might read a book about colors, or you might sing a song about shapes. But think of some way that you're going to engage the children. You don't just sit down and say, hey, let's paint. That's not how teachers introduce activities. And then you're going to use your teaching skills manual, which is I believe the purple book in our classroom that you also have, to think about what teaching skills and strategies you're going to do or use. Next, you're going to explain your lesson plan. And I'm going to show you an example in a minute, but first you would say, first I will read the book ... Second, I will... And then what will you do maybe during the reading of the story? And then what will you do at the end? And how will you lead into the next experience that you're planning for this activity? Really, all of your activities should include some sort of song or book to further engage children. You will list over here in this column the author and title of any book that you use. If you're using paint or paper or sponges, whatever it is that you're going to use should be listed here. As a matter of fact, anybody in your class should be able to pick up your lesson plan here and teach it as if they were a substitute. So if you spell out things very specifically here, then I can absolutely do your lesson. If you say, read a book, I have no idea what you mean. But if you list the author and you say, read the book, numbers and colors, and ask these questions and then do this, then I can adequately teach that lesson. And remember, the goal is that you're professional and prepared, and that you're thinking about children and how you want to be an effective teacher. And so planning is the key part of that. At the end of your lesson plan, you will think, maybe this is step 7, I don't know. How will you conclude the lesson? Will you have them share their artwork? Will you have them hang it on the wall? Will you ask them some questions about how many shapes they have? What will you do to close out the lesson? You don't just say, we're all done now. So think about that. This is the part that you're going to share with your co-op. So Lab 4, you would share this plan with your cooperating teacher. Okay, and then next week in Lab 5, you would teach the lesson. Before you leave Lab 5, you would share this same thing for your plan for week 6. They will be giving you advice. They will give you ideas. They will tell you if something is, not safe or inappropriate. That's why you're sharing it. If you don't share your plan and have them approve it the week before you go, you will not be able to teach your plan, and you will need to make that up. The idea is that as you plan a week ahead, as all teachers do, you can use your cooperating teacher to make sure that you are prepared and confident that your lesson is safe and appropriate for the children. Okay? The top part of your lesson plan is where you're documenting observations. So while you are thinking about what's appropriate, you're going to write down what you've observed about your children the week before. So you might say, my focus child loves trucks. He enjoys running outside and sliding on the playground. He often builds blocks and has been talking about his family trip to the zoo. The whole class loves painting, and the dramatic so you get the idea. The dramatic play area is very popular. They like to dress up as police, and they like to use the cash register. You're going to give several sentences about what you've noticed about the children, so that this observation should reflect why you're planning this. If children are interested in blocks and trucks and you plan for them to make smoothies, what's the connection? I don't see any connection about their interests and needs and abilities to what your plan is. Your plan should always be linked to the interests, needs, and abilities of this class, and they should be explained here. When you write your lesson plans, you're also going to give a title. So in this case, if I was doing math painting, I would write math painting with shapes. Okay, so I would give a title, and I'm always going to put a lab number, the course, and my name. Okay, so that's the main idea. So the next piece is you're going to go back to your manual, and you're going to look at what you're planning for here. This is the language of math. So on your lesson plan, think about what you're really focusing on. So I might say, okay, well, I am going to plan math painting, so the children will use the language of math to solve mathematical problems about shape, while they use numbers and shapes to paint. Okay, and that's what I would write. And I would write that right in here. Okay, the children will use the language of math, and then whatever you're planning from in the manual, where I just said this is what I was going to focus on, and then these two things. Okay, the next thing you're going to do is look at the curricular goal areas, and they are represent and express. They are number 2, inquire and solve problems. They are number 3, connect community and family. And number 4, build relationships and understanding of self. So then you go back to your lesson plan. After you decide, where does what my plan is going to accomplish, where does my plan fit here? So that depends on what your lesson is. And if I'm painting, I might say, well, I'm going to focus on children will represent and express the language of math and number operations when they represent ideas with shapes, when they create and describe patterns. If I'm painting with different shapes, then both of these things would be opportunities. So then I would go back to my lesson plan. Now remember, I just said I'm going to represent and express by creating and describing patterns. So I would say, children will represent and express when they, now I already forgot, so let me go back to my lesson plan. When they create and describe patterns using the tools and paint I provide. Okay? And so here's your goal area. And you don't have to choose that one. You could choose another one. You go down here to solve problems. So notice how objects are the same and different. If you're going to have them print different things on paper with paint and shapes, then maybe you're going to focus on children will inquire and solve problems or experiment. Okay, so you choose. You don't need to make up ideas or goals. The goals are here. You pull from this list in math each week. When your lesson plan is graded, it should be very clear what you've planned for in the language of math, pulling from both lists. It should be very clear what curricular goal you have planned for and where you got your idea. Okay? And then what is much easier, you'll use your PA standard book and you will fill in what you learned, or I'm sorry, what standard you plan to focus on. Now this does not have to be a math standard. It might be approaches to learning and play. It could be physical, depending on what you're planning for. Okay? The next part of your plan is just thinking about how are you going to provide for all children to learn in this activity. Do you have kids that don't have language and therefore can't answer questions? Do you have children who might have physical limitations? So you're going to think about what do you know about your children that you could write here that would indicate that your lesson will meet the needs of all of those children. So that's the basic idea of your lesson plan. This last piece down here is the child assessment piece and the assessment of your learning and use of teaching skills and strategies. But before I explain that, let's look at a completed lesson plan. Okay, so here's one for math. This one's called Walking the Circle. It looks a little bit different than the wide one you just saw, but you can see here that the observation looks like it has a spelling error here, is talking about what the kids can do and what you have observed about the children. In this one, the observation is talking a little bit more about this clad piece because this is a little bit older learning experience plan. In your experience plan that you're working on, that question is just separated. So here's where you talk about how you'd include all different children of backgrounds and cultures, okay? But as far as the example, you'll see here the curriculum goal area. And here the goal area that was focused on is number 4, okay? Build understanding relationship of themselves. The language of learning is connection to math in their own life. And look, measurement is the focus. And again, whoops, where did that go? Bear with me, somehow I closed the framework. Okay, so going back to math, be patient. You can see measurement and make math connections to their daily lives is the connection they're making. Then they have a standard, and then you can see how this is listed step by step by step, and what they will be using. I really certainly like when there's a song and other materials besides just these two things. So while this is well spelled out, I think that you should have music also be part of your resources, because the more resources you utilize, the better you become at using them. And so you see here how they're going to support and stretch. And notice they don't just say support, but they tell what strategies of support. So again, go back to your purple manual and don't just say support, but tell how you'll support or how you will stretch. The last piece is the assessment piece. And this is where you talk about what the children learned. So in math and in the language of learning, whether it's the elements and processes or the curriculum goal, you're going to discuss specifically what did the children do and what did they learn based upon your plan. So this section here should have lots of the words from your plan. The children were able to build relationship and understand themselves because here's what they did. Here's what Johnny said. Here's what Cindy said. Here's what they did. They also learned about measurement because I saw them talking about this and learning this. They made many connections to math in their daily lives as they measured, and here were some of the things that I saw. They also met the standard 2.4, use basic measurement, because they said this and this. See pictures below, or something like that. And you will insert pictures here of your lesson plan that support what you find happened. So this should up here should create a picture, kind of a visual snapshot of what happened, but it should also clearly assess what you planned for. Okay, so in each lesson you are assessing the language of math. How did the children grow in the elements and processes you planned? How did they grow in the goal areas? If for some reason they didn't, then tell me what else they learned. Let's say they didn't represent and express, but you think, I can't believe how much they built relationships. Then say, they didn't represent and express as much. They did this and this, but what they really learned was this and this. I'd also like to mention that here are some other tools and resources for promoting math that you can use. And then the very last piece of your lesson plan, and here's where they inserted their pictures, would be the assessment of your teaching skills. So here you're talking about the teaching skills that you did well and what strategies, and then where do you want to grow. And while this one doesn't do as good of a job as linking the skill and the strategy, make sure that whenever you're talking about your ability, your strength, or your weakness, talk about the strategy. There are many different ways we stimulate. There are many different ways that we support or stretch or observe. So use your manual and make sure that you are linking those clearly. So one last time, we're just going to come back to this. Your class is math. I would photocopy this out of your manual if you want to, or print it from online and keep it with your math stuff. This is where your plan should match each week. So I hope this answers some of your uncertainty about lesson planning, and if you still have questions, you can certainly email me or your professor to get more help.